Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. Chief Welticall with the Mandan Fire Department. I'm here today in front of you to introduce you to the new Fire Station 3 initiative that the Fire Department is going to be rolling out here at the beginning of 2023. So a little bit of background on the Fire Station 3 initiative project. Back in late 2022, the Fire Department conducted what's called a community risk assessment. And a community risk assessment basically tries to look at the data that we collect as a fire department and identify any potential risks that our community may face. That proved to be rather successful. As we started combing through the data, we started to realize a few things that kind of popped up and were brought to our attention. Some of these things can be fairly common. For example, if you see an uptick in a certain kind of fire or a certain kind of injury pattern, maybe we're seeing fires that have been started by candles excessively, or we're seeing patients who are having multiple issues or injuries based upon whatever might be causing them. So throughout that process, like I said, we looked over all that data, and we came up with a top 10 top 10 number of risks. Out of that top 10 that we get, we take the time and we prioritize each of those risks based on the frequency and the severity of those risks. So basically, we look at how frequent does the event that is causing the risk to the community occur, and when it does occur, how severe or how high of an impact does that event have on our community. Of course, each of the 10 risks that were identified have their own prioritization level, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. The number one risk that we found in our assessment was the lacking of emergency response coverage in the northwest section of our city. So we realized, as the data was showing us, that over 60% of our emergency incidents occur in the northwest section of town. As you know, we have two fire stations that we operate. The first is our downtown main fire administration building in the downtown district, and the second is our Lakewood Fire Station, which covers the southeast section of town. So in looking at that data, we realized that we have a pretty significant gap in coverage. So once we realized that, we kind of started to dig into, well, how long is it actually delaying our response, or how far do we have to travel, or what is the actual problem here caused by the lack of a third fire station? And what we realized is our response times to the northwest section of town are significantly delayed. The National Fire Protection Association, or the NFPA, basically sets benchmarks, and it's a guideline in which the fire service tries to adhere to in order to maintain compliance. And I won't bore you with those exact numbers at this time, but what's important here is our fire department only has a 28% compliance rate to those NFPA benchmarks when it comes to emergency medical incidents, and we only have a 7% compliance rate when it comes to fire-related incidents. So this is actually some fairly startling data. When you take that information and you combine it with the fact that 60% of our 2,500 plus calls a year happen in the northwest section of town, we're starting to see the development of a problem or a potential problem. Now, I'm always one to say that a problem is preventable and it's solvable. So this is obviously something that we can work through. It's not something that we don't have an answer to, and I'll get to that in just a little bit again. So as we dug into that data, we were seeing that we have travel times of 5.5 miles roughly to the furthest away places in our city. That's a pretty significant distance. The NFPA recommends about 1.5 mile radius around each of the fire stations as far as the coverage area is concerned. So we are quite outside of that area when we're responding to, the far northwest Rough Rider sections of town from our downtown fire station. We've seen response times to that area be upwards of 13, 14, 15 minutes when they should be down around 5 minutes. So it's not a little bit of a problem. It's quite a big problem at this time. Of course, we know that such a project is it's expansive. It's going to take quite a bit of planning. It's going to take a lot of funding. But I think we have some good answers and a pretty good start to where we want to go with that. And of course, we would like to come to you with a lot of that. We're not here seeking approval to you tonight or anything. We just want to introduce you to the program and why we are seeking what we're seeking. The northwest section of town has a significant amount of what we call multifamily or apartment buildings. These buildings are wood framed or new construction in type. And what we're finding is the modern fire environment, or these buildings that are built of very low mass wood, are burning extremely fast. So when we have a building that's burning extremely fast, we decrease the amount of time that the occupants have to get out of that building. So looking at our 13, 14, 15 minute response times that I mentioned earlier, and coupling that with the decreased amount of time that our occupants have to get out of a home or to be rescued before they're injured or God forbid, killed, we need to make sure that we're able to get to those areas in the appropriate amount of time, and we are not doing that at this time. So I would invite you to come to a meeting that we have set up at the fire station in 2 weeks at 7 p.m. on Tuesday. That meeting is going to have a little bit more information for you regarding kind of the background of the project and how we got where we are now. A couple things I would like you to consider before you come to that meeting is probably the number one question that's on everybody's mind is, how are we going to pay for this? We don't really know the answer to that yet. However, we want to make sure that we are good stewards of the community's money, that we educate the public and yourselves as to why this project is going to be worth the amount of money that we spend on it. So we really want to take our time with that. However, at the end of the day, there is a little bit of urgency here because we've identified this risk. So again, I would invite you to come down to the fire station in 2 weeks and take part in that meeting so we can go a little more in depth as to why we're rolling this program out. Ultimately, I think that if we can overcome the funding hurdles and some staffing and equipment issues that we may run into, I think this is a very solvable problem. And we truly need your help and the public's help to make this happen. So again, the entire purpose of the program is to mitigate the risk that we've identified as prolonged response times in the northwest section of our town. At next week's meeting, we'll have a couple maps for you to look at as well that'll maybe help you see exactly what we're talking about. So for that, I would stand for any questions, and if not, we look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks. Thank you.